podcastprofessor.com. Hey everybody, it's Podcast Professor Lij Shaw, and I wanted to give you guys a brief walkthrough of my podcasting setup. For my newest podcast, which I'm launching today, this is actually the inaugural podcast interview. I have an amazing guest, a guy named Mike Purcell, coming in, who's got a super cool track record of making records, incredible list of credits. He's done multiple startup businesses, and he'll be here shortly, so I've got to do this video in 5 minutes. But this is for my newest podcast called Recording Studio Rock Stars, and I'm basically just interviewing people. So I've got two different ways I'm going to interview people. I have an in-person interview, and then I also have a Skype interview. In this case, I'm doing an in-studio interview, so I'm going to give you guys a super fast walkthrough of how we're doing that here at the Toy Box Studio so that we can be super effective, so that we can have a great flow to it, and so that we get all the stuff we need, including show notes while we're doing the interview. So here we are, we're in my control room. You can see that we have a couple of microphones set up on stands. So this is the Miktek PM9. This is my favorite mic for podcasting. It's a dynamic microphone. It sounds killer. It's basically got a little bit more life to it, and low end and top end, it just sounds like it's got a better EQ curve to my ear than some of the other options out there for dynamic mics. So this is my top choice for a podcasting mic if you're going to use a dynamic. Over here in the background, you can see I'm not using this one now, but a lot of the times for my podcast, if I'm doing a solo show, I will plug and play with the Miktek Procast SST. But in this case, we're going to do standing microphones. So we have two microphone stands right here. I'm using a special mic cable that I really love. It's made by a company called AccuSound. Oh, actually, we don't have both plugged in, so I don't know what happened there. But anyway, we've got quality mic cables plugged into both mics. We have a pop screen going on it. This is one I actually had to get from somewhere else and put on here. And you'll notice it's not pushed all the way on. It's actually scooted out a little bit so that there's an air gap from here to here in front of the microphone. That causes P-pops, plosives, things like that to hit here and stop, and then they don't make it across the air gap to the element of the microphone. That helps with the sound a lot. I decided to do a standing podcast because I think that a standing show has a higher level of energy with the guest and with myself. It gives everybody a chance to kind of move around. You know, you're in a fight there, a podcast interview fight. No, not really, but it just kind of keeps the energy up. And then we also have two music stands, and I have those set up where they're as high as they can go, which is it's not really at the height of like this where you can see it right in front of you, but it's high enough where at least you can have some notes on there. I also got these, so we've got lights to light up paper and pencil, and when we're fully ready, we'll have paper and pencil and printouts laid out on this. I'll have sharp pencils ready to go for my guest and for myself, so that in real time I can take scribbly notes while we're talking, and it helps me write down points that I need to remember so I can refer back to in questions and that sort of thing. We also have a headphone box here on the floor, and we have a matching pair of headphones going. These are the it's a brand new model, so I don't have it memorized, but these things sound great. These are the KRK KNS 8400s. Anyway, we won't be able to zoom in on that. But these things sound great, so I like matching so that we're both getting the same experience. Both of these headphones are running on cables, and they're coming down to our patch bay, where they are patched in right here. Then from this patch bay point, these points are a mirror of that. They come out and go into this on both sides and then out of this. And what this is this runs from the patch bay over to the rack. And this is the Con 2242 mic preamp. This is modeled after a famous mic preamp designer and console designer, Rupert Neve. It's a similar design, I guess, but this is made by a guy named Obad Khan in St. Louis. So I don't know if these are available anymore, but the point is, if you've got a good quality mic pre, you can use whatever you got, and you just go in and set your levels. I have my output set all the way up, and I bring up my input about halfway on the gain here for the PM9s, and that gives a pretty good quality level signal going into Pro Tools. Then at the patch bay, I have the output of these cons come over and they go into Pro Tools right there, input 1 and 2. And then the output of Pro Tools 1 and 2 come over, and they are patched into input 1, which goes to my master volume section. My master volume section, excuse me. And then we have the output of the master volume coming out of here and going out on this cable, which runs back to the headphone box. And that's how we're listening to headphones in here. And also how Benjamin, who's taking show notes in real time, is going to be able to listen to it out there. So now let me take you over and show you guys what's going on the screen. So here's our Pro Tools session. And while I'm recording an interview, I want to do a number of things. I want to make sure we're recording and we're never dropping out of record so I don't miss anything important. I want to make sure that our voices and our microphone levels sound great in both of our headphones, and that we're getting a strong signal to tape, so when we're recording, we're getting plenty of input into Pro Tools, so that I can mix it back later and it sounds great. And then I also want to make sure that we're staying on schedule. So one of the ways that we stay on schedule is I have a window down on the bottom that when I press record, oops, it's set for the wrong thing. So that's the first thing to notice. You want to set this for not bars and beats, but minutes and seconds. So now if I press this, it'll keep track of the timer, and those are seconds counting up, and those are like hundredths of a second or thousandths, milliseconds. And that way I can just glance over and see what time we're doing as we're doing it. Watch your finger, you don't get in the shot there. So let's see, what else do I want to tell you about that? Then positioning in the room is really important too. So for example, I have the guest microphone where he's going to be speaking like this, and he's not looking at the screen. He's not looking at the time. He's not looking at it being recorded. So hopefully my guest won't be conscious of the fact that he's being recorded, but he's going to have headphones on, so he's going to be able to hear himself in the mic. Man, my voice sounds good. That's great. Nice work. And so, but I, on the other hand, am positioned this way so that I can make eye contact with the guest, and while I'm recording, I can glance over, see what time it is, see it's still in record, and not have any risk of dropping out of record or losing the recording. Now if we come over here, I have a couple of other items that are here to help me out, and I'm always trying to figure this out and get it tweaked in a little more, but you'll see I have my lamp over here as well, and then I have a Bluetooth keyboard, and this is actually here just for the purpose of marking the Pro Tools recording while it's recording so that I can mark edit points for later. It can be very time consuming to go through the entire podcast later on and listen word for word and edit it that way, because if it's a 40-minute episode, it could easily take me twice as long as that just to go through the whole thing, find edit points and edit them. So if I can make marks along the way where there are mistakes, where there's a screw up, where there's something that really needs to be fixed, then I could just, at the end of the podcast, jump back and go through those marks and edit all those points. So what I do for that is if I'm in record, here I'll drop myself in a record from the top because I can control that from this keyboard. Now while it's going along, now I just have to hit function and return on this keyboard, and that gives me the enter. And I have set up in preferences in Pro Tools, I've set it up so that you only have to do one key to drop a marker and it will auto name those markers. So unfortunately the markers will have names like marker 1, marker 2, marker 3, really super creative, right guys? But anyway, that's the best we can do. And so what I do is I just hit function, enter while it's recording, and you can see, I don't know if you can see it in the distance there, but it's dropping a marker right there. So if I mess up or if I'm like, oh, let me go sharpen my pencil, I'll just drop a marker. Now later when I'm done with the episode, I can go in, I know you guys can't really see it from here, but I'll explain it. I can go to the end of the recording first and back up to that first marker, edit the audio. That's going to, in shuffle mode, it's going to bring the audio that's to the right. Later in time, it's going to snap it back. And then I'll go backwards to the next edit that, and it's going to snap that back. So you're starting at the end and you're kind of shrinking the whole episode by taking out bits and pieces. But always remember, start at the end and go backwards, because if you start at the beginning, it's going to move your audio later on in later on in the podcast, and that will mess up where your markers are lined up. So just a little tip there. Let's see, I think that might be everything I want to tell you about the control room. So now let's go out. Did I forget anything, Benjamin?
No, that was everything.
All right, cool. Let's go out and I'll show you what is going on while I'm doing the podcast. Here, let me walk first, so that way I can tell you what's going on here. So, all right, here we are in the alternate room of the studio. A couple of things. You might hear the air conditioner now. You can hear this is a bigger space. In order to keep it quiet on my recording, I'm leaving the air conditioner on in the other room, but it's coming through the doors and it's going to cool down the room that I'm in. And we've set up, I didn't show you the plugins in Pro Tools. We had set up a few things to make the voices sound good on the microphones. The first plugin was a gate setting, and it's very, very low threshold, meaning it's only closing down the mic signal when there's absolute silence when I'm not talking on the mic. But it does help to keep this air conditioning noise out of the signal a little bit. And then there are a couple of compressors on there, and the compressors just kind of amplify the sound of the microphones and make them a little louder, which makes the voices sound more like a big radio voice, and it makes it sound great in the headphones. So on this end, Benjamin is going to be taking real-time show notes while I'm doing the show interview. Here's the point. He's got a pair of headphones plugged in. He's got a headphone mixer here. This is the one that lives in our control room, or in our live room all the time. It's plugged into the wall over here. We have a custom snake built for it. It goes over to the wall. It's sending headphones out to the box. This is stuff that's not being used for this, but has to do with recording music. He's got a pair of headphones plugged in. He can listen to the entire podcast interview in real time while it's happening. And what he's going to do is he's pulled up a Google Doc that is in our shared Google Docs folder, and he can take notes while we're doing the interview. So important things that might go into show notes are things like any reference that the guest makes to a website or to a project or to a book or to an app or to, some particularly important item. That way he can grab those items and start searching for links and put links into those, so that when we're done and we edit the show, most of the show notes are already done. And what that prevents is the time consumption of having edited the entire show, then still having to go through and listen through carefully and look for all those details and bits and pieces. So there's a lot of information that can come through on a long interview, a 45-minute interview, and there's a lot of stuff that might be really nice to link to in show notes. This helps make sure that you just get all those bits and pieces so you don't leave something out. Because leaving things out in credits is a real bummer, and it just makes you feel bad if you forget to add a link to something that's really important to your guest, or something that your audience, your listening audience, would love to learn more about and see. So make sure you get all that stuff. Doing it in real time is a great way to knock that out initially, and then you can always go back and I still proof the episode and listen to it, but I like to do that when I'm just in the kitchen doing some dishes or making dinner, and sort of real world, and get a feel for stuff. And then if I hear something that is a problem, I'll fix it. But show notes are, I'll add a few more links to show notes at that point. I think that covers everything for this. I'm Podcast Professor Lij. Thanks for watching this, and happy podcasting to you. As always, remember to, what, Benjamin?
Podcast yourself.
That's right, podcast yourself. Cheers. See you guys later.
I simply must impress upon you not to miss out on our Podcast Professor's private Facebook group. Here, you can post your questions for your podcast professors and your fellow students alike to assist you in solving your podcast challenges. Free your mind. Podcast yourself.
PodcastProfessors.com